Let's just start with what Eamon ended on, the idea of a bilateral agreement, a bilateral trade agreement between the United States and the UK.
Well, a lot of that's going to depend on where the UK goes with respect to Brexit. If they don't make that determination soon, it's going to be very difficult for the United States to negotiate a bilateral FTA. We already do have a series of what are known as mutual recognition agreements in place, one in particular relating to the pharmaceutical industry that would continue essentially current EU trade practices with respect to the UK on those issues indefinitely until there is an FTA. But we're not going to be able to get an FTA hammered out until they decide what they're doing with Brexit. And so this is at least, I would say, several months, if not several years out.
You know, we've talked an awful lot about Facebook and how it's in the crosshairs now for some of its behavior and tactics. But if you think about Trump's trade policies, some of it is the same way. He's got some of the same sort of ideas, move fast and break things, try and make things happen. Do you think that we are going to look back, let's say 10 years from now, and think that these tactics were successful?
Well, I think the question is how we define success. So in the short run, the president's focus has been, you know, can we get Mexico to the table, for example, on immigration? Can we get China to the table on intellectual property and industrial policy? And if the solution is a sort of short-term type deal or something that addresses, for example, the trade deficit, the answer might be yes, we might actually have some sort of short-term agreement. But the question is at what longer-term cost? So, for example, with the case of Mexico, have we compromised the ability to do a larger deal like the USMCA, compromised it in Mexico with Mexican constituencies, as well as here in the U.S. with Congress, because of the president's desire to get a shorter-term deal, let's say, on immigration? So the jury is still out, obviously. The president's success bar could be raised or lowered depending on what set of issues he wants to look at in terms of accomplishing a deal, whether short run or long run.
Well, let's throw China into the mix because that's a little confusing, too. He's looking for longer-term progress on some of these things. And to critics, he would say, look, we haven't gotten anywhere with years of patient negotiating. They continue to take advantage of us. How will we look back? How will we determine whether this was successful or not?
Well, if the president is able to indeed make progress, not just on the current account deficit, because I think that's a relatively thing to solve. Yeah. If he's actually able to say, let's say, turn China away from some of its dyed-in-the-wool industrial policies around joint ventures for U.S. companies or IP theft. If he's able, for example, to get a true compliance regime from the Chinese, if the Chinese are willing to put in place real controls that demonstrate compliance with a deal, particularly around IP protection, that would be a huge accomplishment. And there's no question that previous administrations have tried a patient engagement tactic that hasn't always worked. And so the president's trying something different. We can only hope for success, but obviously the thing that complicates China, as you know, is that there are huge geopolitical questions that are national security oriented, not trade oriented.
And that's what the other side of this equation is. For a long time, we've been in economic peace treaties with these countries as a way of trying to prevent war. Do you think there are going to be any unconsidered fallout, anything that's maybe not anticipated that happens as a result of breaking up some of these deals?
Well, you know, on the geopolitical side, with respect to China in particular, there are huge situations and threats looming on the horizon, whether it's what they're doing in the South China Sea, whether it's their activity with respect to our allies in Japan and Korea. There are all sorts of reasons to believe that the Chinese are looking for regional, if not greater than regional, hegemony. So there are all sorts of geopolitical issues, and I think the president is probably right to consider those geopolitical questions as he evaluates what we do on the trade front. That's what makes this China situation so complicated. It's not just a, hey, let's work out a trade deal. It's, hey, let's work out a trade deal in the context of geopolitical competition, I think I'd argue, unlike any the United States has seen in many years.